Hey, hi everyone. I think everyone has joined us now, so thanks for joining. I'm located in Ghent here, so I'm still having my morning coffee. Thank you for those also joining us from other parts of the world. I hope you either have more coffee than me or you have some energy left in your day. So in today's webinar, we're going to talk about PDFUA. PDFUA is the PDF standard for accessible documents. Before we get to that, let me introduce myself and my colleague Michael and the company we work for, IText. So my name is Kenneth. I'm the technical product marketing manager at IText. That means I make sure our developer community has all the tools and content they need. And I've also been very focused on creating content such as the recently released PDFA and PDFUA ebooks. With me today is Michael. Michael is our research manager already for more than 10 years now. Michael, maybe you want to explain what that entails?
Yeah, thank you, Kenneth. So I'm the research manager. That means that my team and myself, we are responsible for innovation within the company, prototyping, stuff like that, but also standardization, which means writing up and contributing to the international community surrounding PDF, which is what we're doing here today as well.
Thanks for pointing that out, Michael. Before we get to the main event, let me share some practical info. Today's webinar will be recorded. You'll receive a link by email the day after the webinar. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can type them in the chat, and then we'll have a Q&A session to handle all those questions at the end of the webinar. And finally, last but not least, if you want to share something about this webinar on social media, you can use the hashtag IText. So it also gives Michael and me a chance to see what's being said about this. Before we get to the main theme of today, let me introduce IText to you. So IText is best known for its leading open source PDF library. It has been around for over 20 years. It offers all the core functionality you would expect to create a PDF. That includes creating PDFA and PDFUA compliant documents, digital signing, advanced security and encryption, HTML conversion, and so on. We also have a bunch of closed source add-ons that can do anything from optimizing your PDFs for size and speed to advanced cryptography. Next to that, we have our template-based document generator, IText Ditto. IText Ditto is built around a visual designer and makes it really easy for anyone to build documents fast. You can leverage your data as input and output thousands of documents a day. It also lets you manage all your resources like templates, images, fonts. IText Ditto has been around for a few years now and has really expanded based on the feedback of our customers. So that's always important to hear from you. We have over 125 million users worldwide with about 15,000 downloads a day. We also like to be at the forefront of PDF innovation. We are a board member of the PDF Association, as Michael already mentioned, and we are a part of various ISO committees. We have more than 7,000 customers over basically all industries you could think of, many big enterprises among them. We're being used by over 70% of Fortune 50 companies. Some names here you will definitely recognize. And if you want to be part of or contribute to the IText 7 community, you can find all information on our website. If you're interested, you can also indicate so in the survey at the end of this webinar. So now I'll turn my webcam off for the main presentation so you have a better view. So today we'll learn why we should make documents accessible and why PDFUA is best suited for that. We'll also give you a look into the requirements of the standards and validation tools. We'll see how universal accessibility really can benefit all users with and without disabilities. And we'll round it up with a demo of PDFUA with IText. And perhaps then we can have some questions. So why PDFUA? Well, stating the obvious here, but today digital documents are everywhere. Not just as an alternative anymore, more often even with official documents, you can only get them in digital format. And that's not a bad thing. I think we can all agree that they are less cumbersome for many reasons. Digital documents are easy to reproduce, they can be very secure if you do it right, and you can transfer digital files easily. It's also the main reason we are transferring to a paperless world, as famously depicted in the popular Office series we see here on the right, where a paper company was trying to survive in the digital era. Limitless paper in a paperless world. Not exactly a slogan that survived the time. And when we look at digital document formats, we notice that PDF dominates. These are results from a Google search on file type. And we see that PDF represents about 90% of published digital documents today. And the number has been mostly rising since 2011 and will probably continue to do so. And that's why it's so important that we make our PDF files universally accessible. What that means is that everyone should have equal access to all information in the document. So if you are a user with a visual impairment or a user on a mobile device, it doesn't matter. You should be able to get the same information from the document that any other user has. In order to understand how to do this, we need to know how our audience consumes these documents. And our biggest stakeholder, or at least the stakeholder with the biggest need for accessibility, are the over 1 billion people with disabilities worldwide. And often, depending on the disability, of course, those users will use assistive technology to read and or navigate the documents. Some examples are a braille display, which gives tactile output to the reader in braille language, which you see on the top left here. Screen readers that read the document out loud. And alternate input devices, some of them you see on the bottom here, like the chin mouse, adaptive keyboard, and trackball. If you look at these devices, it is quite obvious to see that it is not only important for users with disabilities to be able to access all information, but to do so efficiently. Because of these limited controls and output, it's a matter of efficiency, and that is reflected in the PDFUA standard. So it brings us to the requirements now. First, when we talk about digital accessibility for digital content, it is impossible to ignore the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. You might have heard of them. They work very well for web pages, and they are even written in a technology neutral way, so they can be applied to PDF. But that also means they are very general, and when applying them to PDF, there is a lot of room for interpretation. PDFUA, on the other hand, is format specific. It is very focused on document structure. It does not focus so much on accessible design. For example, in WCAG, contrast guidelines are a hard requirement. In PDFUA, they are not. Unlike other PDF standards, the PDFUA specification go a bit further than requirements for the PDF itself, and also set requirements for applications that process the documents and assistive technology. PDFUA, or more specifically the version that is out now, which is PDFUA 1, is based on PDF 1.7, but adds some additional requirements and constraints to ensure accessibility. The specification is about 70 pages long, so I can't and won't get into all details here, but you can find a more detailed overview in the new IText PDFUA ebook, which I'll link you at the end of the webinar, and I think my colleague will put it in the chat. One of the main requirements is that all meaningful content should be tagged. That means that the type of every meaningful element should be identified. Content that isn't meaningful, such as certain background images, should be indicated as an artifact. When we put all these tags in the right reading order, then we get a structured tree. I'll show you more on these tags in the structured tree on the next slide. Next to that, other things are of course important. The screen reader needs to know which language the document is written in. Another really important one is that all images have an alternative description, because images are often more than just decoration. So a user that isn't able to see these images will lose a lot of information. So when we make an alternative description, it is important that it really accurately represents what the image depicts. And finally, if you want a sort of reference guide with all of these requirements, the Matterhorn protocol was created by the PDFUA Competence Center for that exact reason. And it's a lot easier to digest than the PDF spec. It's a list of 31 checkpoints further divided into 136 failure conditions. So you can basically check boxes for all individual requirements. So we zoom in on tag PDF, perhaps the most important requirement within PDFUA. Tag PDF identifies the type of each element. For example, as you see on the right, figure, paragraph, and so on. And all of these tags form the structured tree, and the order of the tag sets the reading order. And this is one of the important parts of the PDFUA spec, structure, which is very important if you have to navigate a document with limited controls, like the input devices we just saw, or when using a screen reader, for example. So documents need to be tagged, but they need to be tagged in a good way. And a good guide is the best practices guide by the PDF Association. A lot of authoring software will auto-tag your documents. But if you want to do so on a large scale, you can use the PDF libraries such as IText 7. But at the moment, it should be said that all software will do so imperfectly. Even Adobe is own InDesign. So the reality today is that any PDFUA file would have to be checked manually again. There are, however, PDFUA validation tools that can perform a number of machine tests for you. And the screenshot on the right, the Matterhorn protocol we just talked about is tested. And that file is, of course, an example of a fully compliant PDFUA document. So you can see all boxes are checked here. The tool used here is the most used one, I think. It's the PDF Accessibility Checker. Its latest version, the 2021 version, also comes with WCAG validation on top of it. And it has a handy screen reader preview, which lets you see how a screen reader interprets your document. But you always need human verification on top of machine checks in the validation tool. Some things are just not machine identifiable, such as the right reading order intended by the author. And other things such as the alternative descriptions need a quality check. While they are checked here, there is no way for the back checker to know if the descriptions are really filled with meaningful text. So it does require a human verification. So one might say, with all the advances in machine learning and AI we had over the last years, why not leverage that? We could perhaps use AI to auto-generate alternate descriptions or recognize language. We wrote a blog on this very subject, and it is still an interesting read. However, let me give you the conclusion for now. It doesn't always work well enough for an accessibility use case. This here is an example of an auto-generated caption. The picture shows one of the best male rock climbers in the world competing in the Olympics. but the caption reads, "Young woman climbing wall in gym, full length of determined female is exercising. She is in sports climbing." And I think we can all agree this isn't very useful to anyone, let alone as an alternate description for somebody with a visual impairment. And there really goes to show there is no such thing as close enough in accessibility. Often the machine learning algorithm will miss lack of context or the intent of the author. I think you can also see that here on the right, the sentence, "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy grass," it says here. Of course, yeah, the AI missed that. It was supposed to be dog there. Good example how we can use AI appropriately from now in an accessibility use case is using it as a fallback. And some screen readers incorporate such a mechanism already. When there is no or lacking alt description, the JAWS screen reader, for example, can give you an auto-generated alt description of images. So now I have a question for you. Let me just pop that up. So to get a sort of view on the adoption of PDFUA within this audience, set up this poll. The answers are anonymous and are only used within this webinar. So I'll give everyone some time to give an answer. Let's say about 20 seconds or something. You'll get the chance to answer this. Really curious about it. So please do. Right, I think everyone has found a way to answer this. So let's have a look at the results. So let me share the results yet. So it seems that 21% said yes, all of them are PDFUA compliant, which is already pretty impressive. But then 42 indicate that none of them are PDFUA compliant. So, and 32% says only some of them. And well, this is actually in line with what I expected. When I reached out to some accessibility communities and users with disabilities, I would get the feedback that it seemed that less than 1% of documents was compliant to them. And that was mostly in documents within the public sector. So let me hide the results here so we can continue. And of course, yeah, there is a lot of legislation that is encouraging that not only the public sector, but also the private sector to step up in terms of accessibility. Section 508 and ADA in the States and the EU Accessibility Directive taking full effect in 2025. There is more on legislation in the IText ebook, but what really should motivate us all is the universal benefits. And that's what I want to expand on today with 4 examples of universal benefits. And that is benefits that apply to everyone, both users with and without disabilities. And when you think about it, we have all been in a situation before where we want to view a PDF file, have limited input controls, and a hard time viewing the content. Or mobile devices. PDFs are often used for long read content, and that can be hard to read on a small screen. And it ultimately leads to a frustrating experience. where you are pinch zooming in and out all of the time and scrolling back and forward in the document with your fingers just to read a small paragraph. How does PDFUA help? Well, first of all, since all the elements in the PDFUA are tagged by definition and identified, it is easier to reflow a layout when resizing. And if you want to focus on certain sections, you can make other sections collapsible. And furthermore, PDFUA will already have a logical reading order in place, so all navigation can happen a lot more efficient. An example of this is Adobe Liquid Mode. Adobe Liquid Mode tries to leverage AI in a combination with tagged PDF. However, this is a proprietary technology for their mobile reader, and it still has a long way to go. Only works for simple PDF files for now. But even if AI prevails, PDFUA and its tags will help greatly in this use case. The next advantage is that PDFUA has some provisions for text-to-speech. It's a technology that is not only used by users with a visual impairment anymore, but also by home assistants that are becoming more and more widespread. And maybe it's not even likely that your car sometimes reads text message to you. How does PDFUA help here? Well, since PDFUA enables screen readers, it's perfect for other text-to-speech applications. So the reading order will already be in place. Those devices can only read the document's text, right, if they know the reading order. We also need language detection. If you ever had the navigation system in your car read a foreign language reading to you, you will realize why that is so important. And finally, alternate descriptions for images, which can be very important for image-heavy PDFs. Do notice that I use the word potential for text-to-speech here, because today home assistants don't get fully leverage PDFUA's provisions. However, web content-focused initiatives like Google's Read It project aim to make long-read content available no matter the form, and PDF is then certainly the most famous long-read format. The next universal benefit relies again on the tags every PDFUA document must have. In the last decade, it has become obvious that PDFs in their current form aren't always web-friendly. So to resolve this, the PDF Association introduced an algorithm that derives HTML from tagged PDF. Dual Lab implemented this in a proof of concept called ngPDF, which stands for the next generation of PDF. And the whole project is actually powered by the IText library. So how does PDFUA help here? Well, there are a lot of similarities between the structure tree that is formed by the PDFUA tags and the HTML's document object model, or in short, DOM, formed by HTML tags. Often tags are even the same, making the derivation quite simple, of course. For example, a paragraph is p tag in both HTML and tagged PDF, for example. But there is a derivation algorithm, and it makes an appropriate translation for every element. For example, a table of contents, TOC in PDF tag will translate to an ordered list, or OL element in HTML. We do have a white paper for this that has been authored by IText and Dual Lab, and I think my colleague will once again put that link in the chat so you can have a look. And finally, when we create public PDFs, we want them to get some traffic and to be found, right? And the primary way people find content on the web today is by organic search. And PDFs have been indexed in Google since 2001. And then I'll also include featured snippets. So you can have a preview of the document in the search results, as you can see on the right. The good news is that making a PDF document accessible already allows for easier web crawling by search engines such as Google. And that will make your document rank higher in the search results. How does PDFUA help exactly? Well, first and foremost, I think PDFUA requires text-based PDFs, so rather than an image-based PDF. This makes the document's body text searchable. And just as a side note, if you want to convert your scanned image-based PDFs, you can do so by using OCR, optical character recognition. An example of such a tool is IText PDF OCR. Since we also tag structure elements in PDFUA, like headings, for example, H1, H2, and so on, search algorithms can navigate the document structure and determine which content is more important. PDFUA also requires alternate descriptions for images, not only allowing access by screen readers to know what is in an image, but also by web crawlers. And finally, PDFUA requires for the language or languages of a document to be specified. So the web crawler will immediately understand what language or languages the document is written in, again, allowing for better SEO. So if you have any questions already, be sure to put them in the questions tab. Right now, Michael is going to demo how to use IText 7 to create a PDFUA compliant document, and then we'll get to the Q&A. So shifting control to Michael here. Are you ready, Michael?
I should be. Okay. Tell me that you're seeing the slides right now.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, Kenneth?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so I will be showing some code on how to create PDFUA files with IText. Let me first put it on the presentation mode so it's a bit more legible. First, we'll be making a very simple PDF file. I'll create a very funny looking invoice, but it's representative of an invoice nonetheless. And then we'll be making that accessible. So this is the code here for those of you who aren't familiar with Java. I'll briefly touch upon it. So we're going to set up the IO here. So we're going to write to a file here, to an invoice.pdf. We are going to create a PDF writer, and then we're going to pass that to the PDF document. A PDF document is what we call a low-level object within IText, which allows you to fine-tune the nitty-gritty details of PDF syntax. We understand that most developers don't really want to do that, so we offer a high-level API, which is enclosed in the document clause, amongst others. This high-level API allows us to easily add features to PDF files. For instance, if we add a header to the document, all we need to do is load up an image and pass it, for instance, in this case, a path to the image, so logo.png. This is all to make the life of the developer easier so that he doesn't need to load in the image himself and then convert the file format if necessary and then write that to PDF in some kind of way, which would require him to know or at least grasp the PDF specification, which is what we're here to do, right? So we load up the image and then we pass that to the document, and then that image is included in the document. After that, we are going to add the table with the line items. So we have a small title here, so invoice 1 apparently. We're not a very this demo company is not very it's rather new, let's say. So then we are going to add a table with 4 columns, and we are going to add 16 cells. So we're going to add header cells, footer cells, and regular cells. So the items that we've sold are 2 pictures of Kenneth and myself, which go for 20 euros, which is a steal, I would say. And then we also have the PDFUA book. As you can see, it's free. You can download it using the link that we've shared in the chat. And then we add that table to the document. to round off the invoice. So it's a very simple invoice. It's not styled that well because, to be fair, I'm not a designer, I am a developer. So test passed. Let's see. So we have invoice PDF right here. If I open it up in Acrobat, you can see we have a nice logo and we have a rough rudimentary table with the content inside. A thing to note is that this is not PDFUA compliant. It's a regular PDF file. It does not contain any tags, as you can see here in Acrobat on the tags pane. There's no tags available. If we run pre-flight, which is a tool that is included in Acrobat, amongst which you can check, for instance, compliance with PDFUA 1 in this case. And as you can see, it's not compliant at all, but we didn't set out to make this compliant at all. So the next step that we're going to take is something that Kenneth already mentioned, and adding structure to the PDF file. Having a tagged PDF file is of the utmost importance to have a PDFUA compliant file. The PDF file that I just opened includes a table, for instance. The table in pure PDF is a non-tagged PDF, so to say, is basically just a collection of operations, printing operations. It tells the printer or the screen, the viewer in this case, to draw lines at these locations and to position text at absolute or relative coordinates. There is no notion of a table. Luckily, with IText, you can easily add the context for that. So we can tell the PDF file that there is a table inside because we're working with the high-level API. So IText already knows that it's including a table into the PDF file. So all we need to do is tell the PDF documents, hey, you're a tagged document. And if we run that, then IText will gather all the information and include that in the PDF file. So as you can see, invoice underscore tagged popped out here. And if we open that, you can see visually it's still the same document, nothing really changed. But if we now open the tag panel, you can see there's content here. We have tags. If we, for instance, go to the table, you can see there's a header, a body, and a footer. Opening up the body, we see there are 2 regions here, 2 rows. And the text is available in the paragraph. As you can see, picture of Kenneth and Michael is available here. And Acrobat will link the 2 visually, just to show you where things are. But again, this is not a PDFUA compliant document. It is a tagged document. So we need to go one level deeper. And to do that, we need to add a bit more stuff. So we are now going to write an accessible document. So one of the provisions that you need to follow is you need to add XMP metadata that complies to the UA standard. Luckily for you, IText will do that for you. It has provisions, it has convenience methods for you to add XMP metadata. As Kenneth already mentioned, the base PDF version for PDFUA 1 is PDF 1.7. So we also have to set that into a writer properties object and pass that to our IText IO. And then we have to do a bit more. So we, as before mentioned, we have to make the document tagged, but then we also have to add some visual metadata, or at least useful metadata to the document itself. So we have to set the title. We want to make sure that it is displayed in this line right here. And then we also have to set the language of the document. So the default language of this document is ENUS. In this case, could also have been another variation of the English language, but let's just go with the US one. Then we just can't go and add the header, the image as it were, because if you recall from the information that Kenneth gave you, images, for instance, they need to have an alternate description, similar to how HTML works. So if we go to add tagged header, then you can see we load up the image in the same way. We scale it again to make sure that it's not oversized. But then we add an alternate description. So we get the accessibility properties, and then we set the alternate description. In this case, it's the logo of the IText software group, which should give screen readers and people who use assistive technology an idea of what the image represents. Then we add that to the document. As a second step, we add the table, but we need to make some changes to the code. First of all, because in the previous table adding code, we were a bit lazy. We were making use of the convenience methods that IText provides. For instance, we were adding directly text to a cell, whereas you can also add a paragraph to it. Now, to add, for instance, accessible properties to a piece of text in IText, you need to wrap it in a paragraph. And one of the things that we need to do in PDFUA is we need to embed the font. So in this case, we load up a PDF font from my system. So in this case, I'm going to load up Arial TTF, and we are going to tell IText to embed it. Make sure that you have a font that you can that you have the license to embed and to distribute, of course. Then for every piece of text, we are going to add the font to that. So it's not a lot of changes, and your code still looks the same. But that's how to do that. Let me find the code again. Okay, run PDFUA test. Let's run PDFUA test. And there we go, no errors. So this is the same PDF. Visually, it's again the same PDF. The tags are still there, as you can see. Includes the image here. You can go to the properties and you could see, for instance, the alternate text here, logo of the IText software group. And the language that we have set, you can see here in the it was advanced, yeah, advanced. In the language option here in the reading options. Now going to this button here, which tells you which standards this document will adhere to, which will it try to comply to, and you'll see here that it says that it's PDFUA 1. Well, it only tells you that it's compliant. So let's just hit up pre-flight again and verify compliance with PDFUA 1. And luckily, the checks that Adobe performs pass. There are external tools, external to Adobe Reader, Acrobat Reader, that do this in a more thorough manner. For instance, you have Wrapup, which is an open source library available on GitHub. But you also have PAC, which is a user interface, which will show you a report of what is wrong with your PDF file. Now I'm going to try and share the screen reader functionality. I'm hoping it will work. If not, you could try it out yourself. If you have a PDFUA file, go to View, read out loud, and then you activate it, and then you read this page only. So let's hope it comes through the stream. If not, you can try it out at home. So I'm not sure if that came through, but I just let it read out loud.
I heard it very vaguely, Michael, but I think you're right. Your point does come across. Yeah.
Okay, so it's read out loud for those of you who couldn't hear it. The logo, text, and the invoice. Yeah, it did it again. So the invoice title. So that was the demo that I had for you. Let me just transfer controls back to you, Kenneth. And there we go. Kenneth, you're muted.
Hey, sorry, Michael, just a second. I just have to swap my screen for a second. I thought you were going to continue. Okay, let me know if you see the right screen or you just see yourself repeated.
No, I see the question slide.
Okay, I don't want to create a Michael inception.
Let's not do that.
So I see we already have quite some questions. We'll try to handle them all within this webinar. If your question doesn't get answered, we'll definitely get back to you by email within a day. But I also want to take a brief moment to announce the release of our new ebook on PDFUA. It expands on all the topics we talked about today. but also goes deeper into the laws and regulations and on the creation of PDFUA with IText that Michael just showed. It's around 25 pages in total, I think. It's very useful content and it's completely free. I think my colleague will or has already posted a link in the chat, so be sure to give it a look. So questions. I'll get started right away because I see we have a few. Well, there's a question from Nora Michael. Do you have any insights on when PDFUA 2 is coming and what to expect? You take this one.
Yeah, sure. So I don't have a concrete idea of the release date. It's gonna take a while, another year or two maybe. So I'm gonna answer a bit more on the what to expect. So first thing that we are doing with PDFUA 2 is, as you know, PDF 2.0 has been released quite a while ago. So we are bringing PDFUA 2 standard to the, let's say, the platform of PDF 2.0 to make sure that we can leverage all the benefits that 2.0 brings and to build on top of that. We are also reworking a few things that we've learned along the way. I think PDFUA has been out, the first version at least has been out for I think 6, 7, 8 years, maybe even more. I'm going by memory. So we are reworking on that. So think harder, better, faster, stronger. So just more and better with the experiences that we've had over the past few years.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So to give people some context, Michael is member of those working groups and is closely involved. But as you can see, it might still take a while for PDFUA 2 is released. And next question from Dave: is making PDFUA compliant files with IText free? I think I can answer that for you, Dave. The functionality is part of IText 7 Core, and it is open source under a GPL license. So this means you can use IText 7 for free in your own open source projects where you disclose your own code. For commercial projects, you can apply for a free trial before you buy a commercial license. If you want to read more licensing, you can definitely find it on our website. Let's see. A question from Anthony here. Anthony is asking if IText HTML to PDF conversion file will that be PDFUA compliant? So to give some context again to everyone here, we have a functionality that goes from HTML to PDF, an add-on for IText. So are those files PDFUA compliant? Michael, can you take this one?
Yeah, I can take this one. So they can be PDFUA compliant because you do need to put in some work at some point, because certain constructs in HTML, for instance, don't translate all too well to PDF. Just thinking on the top of my head, for instance, JavaScript is something that is not very well supported in PDF because of many reasons, and obvious reasons as well. But there's also the notion of some HTML being used incorrectly by having some structures that should have been served as for instance, a structural element, that they serve as content items. For instance, divs that can be used in different ways. But IText has a product PDF HTML, and you can customize it to make sure that your PDF files can be PDFUA compliant, but you need to put in some legwork. Like, for instance, you have to translate certain divs into certain PDF structure elements to make sure that your intention of the document, of your HTML documents, is transferred correctly to the PDFUA document, because it's all about author intent. It's all about making sure that the document conveys the intention of the author and how he wrote the document, how he wrote the content. So as to not make sure that certain content is translated incorrectly, you might have to do some customization.
Okay, I think that answers the question for Anthony. Anthony says thanks.
You're welcome.
The next question: can I use IText without coding knowledge? I think I can answer that. IText 7 is a software library that requires knowledge of C# or Java to implement. But we also have IText Ditto, as I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, which is a template-based PDF generator where you can find your data and then create documents on a large scale, such as invoices, for example, based on your customers' data. And there is an option to check for PDFUA compliance and apply a number of settings so to make your document ready, PDFUA ready. Let me see. Yeah, I think this is Ahmed has a question. I think it's a bit wider than the scope of this webinar, but definitely also applies here. Okay. How can I use Arabic language in PDF? It says in PDFA here, but I think maybe Ahmed also means PDFUA.
So the question is, how can I use Arabic language?
How can I use Arabic language in PDF? Yeah.
PDFA. Okay. Well, the answer doesn't differ that much from PDFA to PDFUA. You are going to need a few things. So first of all, you're going to need the Arabic text, obviously. Secondly, if you want to include that text into IText, you're going to need a font file that supports the glyphs, the characters that you're going to use. So you're not going to be able to use Western or Latin script font files. So let's say that Comic Sans doesn't have any information for Arabic script, then you can't use Comic Sans for it. And then with IText, you would need to make the constructions that you saw earlier. You have to create paragraphs, and then you include the font. But you would also need to include PDF Calligraph, which is an add-on, a plugin that we have on top of IText 7, for you to be able to enable the ligatures that Arabic has. So Arabic has, if you see the writing in Arabic, it's all like fluently connected together, all the characters, instead of like in the Western Latin script, you have characters side by side. Like on your slide here, you have questions, the letters aren't connected. You have that in Arabic. So to enable that, which is a bit more complex, we have written PDF Calligraph. So if you combine those three with the code samples I just showed you, with the techniques that we've just seen, you should be able to create PDFUA files. For PDF Calligraph, you can try it out. We have a trial on the website that you can use to try out PDF Calligraph, because that's not an open source product of ours.
Yeah, I see an additional comment that his question was specifically for C#, but I think it's also available for Java and C#, right, Michael?
Yeah, most of IText, most of our products, they at least the coding ones, the libraries are available for both languages, both platforms, so Java and C#. And the libraries are for both languages are almost completely functionally equivalent. So whatever you can do in Java, you can do in C#. You just need to change the code to be adhering to the conventions in .NET, like the method starts with capital letters and stuff like that, but they are almost copy pastable, let's say, almost.
Okay. Yeah, I think that answers fully answers the question. Thank you for that, Michael. Ahmed, you seem to have maybe a specific use case, and maybe others also have a very specific use case. Know that you can always mail to us, and we can give you a longer answer than we were able to give here. So definitely reach out to us if you have a specific project in mind. Maybe, yeah, I see we're running out of time, but maybe you have time for one more question.
Yeah, sure.
Michael, there's a question here from Sophie. I saw that you defined the language of the document as being English US. Not every country has a single main language, such as Canada. Here which has French and English. Is there a way to set multiple languages in a document?
Yeah, there is. So just like Canada, Kenneth and I, we live in a country that has multiple languages. We have 3 official languages even. So any official documents that go out from the government, like new laws and new legislation, has to go out in at least 2 languages. So the document contains Dutch and French. And to be able to have those accessible, you need to tag the Dutch as Dutch and the French as being French, obviously. So what you can do as on the accessibility properties that you saw earlier, you can also set those on specific text blocks or specific objects, and then you can declare the language there. So that you would have a very specific piece of text just be Dutch, and then the main language of the document could be French, for instance. So you can switch how many times you want to, basically, and as long as it makes sense, obviously. But yeah, it's perfectly possible to have a multilingual document.
Okay, I think that's good information for lots of people in that situation. I think we'll run up the questions here. Again, we can answer everything by mail if you have any additional questions after this this webinar. I want to thank everyone first. That concludes our time for today here. But before you go, I want to inform you that we have our next webinar on Tuesday already. Our VP of Product, Andre, will be doing a joint webinar with developer community site DZone on microservices providers. Once again, you'll find the link in the chat if you want to register. Thank you, Michael, for teaming up with me today, and thank you all for joining this webinar.